What's up, everybody? How's it going? This is Ron Sparkman here from Stardom, and today we have a very special guest. It's really hard to put you into one category. So we've got Thaddeus Cesari here. He's a space journalist, photographer, documentarian, filmmaker, science communicator. He's a great deal of things, and we're going to dive into all those in just a few minutes. So first up, Thaddeus, hi. How are you doing today? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here today.
Well, we are glad to have you. So before we dive into you, we want to cover a topic that's fresh on all of our minds. We just lost Stephen Hawking, and it's definitely rocked the science and space world. So were you a big fan of Stephen? Did he have a major influence in your life at all?
Oh, big fan. And it's difficult when we lose a symbol of science and progress and intelligence like that, especially when we don't have in my mind at least, a suitable follow-up. When Stephen Hawking is gone, Stephen Hawking, I should say, when he's gone, it's like you think about who would follow him up, like who's number two, and I have a hard time, putting an exact name to that. So when society loses a symbol of these these big factors of science and intelligence and progress, it's especially impactful and sad to see them go, because right now I don't think we have a suitable follow-up that kind of grabs public attention and knows the name like a sling word, like everyone knew who he was. So it's especially sad to see him go, because he's left a big vacuum, and I'm really curious to see who's going to fill it in after him.
I also think he would have thought it was hysterical that you said he left a big vacuum, because we all know he had that kind of sense of humor, and that's he was always willing to just mess with everybody a little bit, and just to have him for as long as we did, for him to have been in his early 20s when he contracted the disease that he had, and your life's over in a year or two, and for us to see, to get him for another 55 plus ish years, it was truly a blessing. I think we're glad to have him, and he was such a major inspiration to so many people, and I think all of us have those types of inspirations, and I know you have to have something that inspired you. So is there a person or thing that inspired you to follow your passions in space?
Sure. I think there was a person and a thing. To start off, the person, Carl Sagan, he's, I talk about him all the time. Yeah, I saw that, and I wanted to, exactly. When I first stumbled onto his words, just something changed pretty drastically. Certain areas of life, they made a little bit more sense, because he gave me a lens to look at the world with that I didn't previously have. So I followed I was looking for something. I was curious, and I was striving for something, but I didn't have the words for it. And when I first heard Carl speak and started reading his books, it's like, wow, this guy gets it. He's saying all of these things that I have been thinking about, but hadn't been able to properly, just capitulate and verbalize. So when I first started, getting into his work, it really just, the world opened up for me, because I felt less alone, to be honest, in my thoughts. Like, wow, this guy is out there, and he's doing all these great things, and
he's real. Yeah.
He's real. Yeah, this is not. These aren't just. Yeah, exactly.
Somebody can write this well. Are you sure? Yeah.
Exactly. And make it approachable too. That's the thing. Carl, I mean, he was intelligent beyond measure, but the fact that he could break down something as complex as like orbital dynamics and make you just completely understand it. He was a very impressive creature. So as a person, he was definitely my catalyst into what I'm doing today. But the thing was, I was a loner growing up. I spent a lot of time outside, in the forest or outside hiking alone. But at night, I had a hard time sleeping. So I would spend a lot of time out in farmers' fields, or again in the forest, just kind of wandering around. And a lot of that time was spent just looking up at the stars, just laying down at 2, 3, 4 o'clock, whatever it was, just laying there and looking up and just wondering. And countless nights just spent just staring out there, just using my creative imagination to, think about what's out beyond that star, what's happening out there. That thing, being, a child and just simply looking up at the stars, that act alone, I think, helped lead me into being supremely curious about the industry of aerospace.
And you can certainly see that Carl has definitely had an influence on you. You're a space journalist, and that's really what you've been up to most recently. How did you decide to go that route instead of saying, all right, I want to be an astronomer, you know, I want to run a planetarium, I want to be an astronaut? What made you decide to go that route instead?
Sure. That's a great question. And I guess I've always had somewhat of an innate skill at writing. I never really acknowledged it. I intentionally kind of kept it buried in the closet for a while. But that was just something that I was always good at. And in school, I kind of ignored it. I went a science route because I didn't think there was too much merit to using the written word when I was younger. So I guess it was something that I was always good at. So I had an opportunity to apply for what's called the NASA Social. And it's a fantastic program. The NASA Social program has touched so many lives. And, you know, mine is another example of that. So I had this opportunity to come into NASA and check out a launch from the inside. And at that time, I was just this guy on the outside. I liked rockets, I liked space, but I really didn't, you know, I had no idea about what was going on. I hadn't seen a SpaceX rocket, I hadn't seen a ULA rocket or a NASA rocket launch. So they brought me in, and I just had this profound experience. And I sat around for weeks and months after, just trying to figure out like how I could get myself back there. You know, it's like, I got to get some more of that. It was so good.
It's a hell of an addiction to have.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, you know, I got that first taste of it. And, you know, at that point, I had to have more. So I gave a ring out to a newspaper that I used to write for in high school and college, and just pitched this idea like, hey, let me write you a couple articles about space. You don't have to pay me. Just give me the press credential and I'll go there and do some work for you. And that was the onset. It was this really small, cruddy newspaper, but they gave me the press credential, and I walked onto NASA for the first time with this like, "Hey, I'm a member of the press. You know, you guys got to take me serious." And I was brand new to the industry, so I really didn't have any idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that was the entrance point, and from there, it's taken shape in so many different forms since then. And that was about 3.5 years ago.
And you certainly become an expert at articulating the experiences that you have, so that people feel like they're there. So can you kind of give us an idea? Tell us, you know, through your eyes, what it's like to witness a rocket launch, especially, you know, the Space Coast is special. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what that experience is like?
Sure. Rocket launches are, well, I mean, to begin, there's something that they're hard to describe in words themselves. There's certain moments in life that you just have a really difficult time explaining verbally, and this is one of them. But you know, the way we experience it in the press, we get a bit of an intimate experience. We get to go inside of the launch complex and, you know, stand really close to the rocket, you know, and it becomes very intimate. Like you get to know it, you know, you hear the sounds, and you know exactly what's inside the payload, you know where it's going. So it becomes a very intimate experience. Mm-hmm. And there's so much pressure and stress, and everyone's excited, like waiting for this moment. There's hundreds of people around you, and everyone's just kind of like building up and sweating and being nervous about publishing their articles or their pictures. So there's this stress and anticipation in the air. And, you know, on the NASA loudspeakers or the SpaceX or the ULA loudspeakers, you hear that, you know, that countdown, and it's just like, it really just boils up from inside of you, and you know, and you hit 10 seconds and 9, and things just go wild. It's such a visceral experience, because as soon as that thing takes off, well, shortly thereafter that thing takes off, you start to feel this absurd rumble that just shakes you from the core. You know, and that's something that you only get if you're there. You know, if you're watching on a screen, you hear the rumble, but you don't have it actually hitting you and shaking your body in the ground next to you.
Yeah.
And, you know, as it's starting to move up, it's just, you can feel your jaw dropping as the rocket's going up, because you know, it's kind of like in parallel. One's going up and one's going down. Yeah. So
jaws dropping is the
yeah, it's an asymptotic relationship. One's going up, one's going down. But yeah, it imbues this feeling of awe. You know, if you're looking at this massive ball of flame, and you know that it's a technological achievement to the highest degree, and you're just watching it, and it's just this beautiful, loud, visceral, bright thing in front of you, like you just have to stop. Like your shoulders go slack, and you just stare at it for a little while. You know, there's points like I'm a photographer and my job is to be there to take really good photos of that rocket as it's launching. Yeah. There's moments when I'm taking pictures of these rockets that I just like, I'm clicking away, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to stare at this thing for a little while because, you know, it's just got me.
Yeah.
So to liken it to, you know, I've climbed a lot of mountains before, and that same feeling that I get when I climb X amount of hours or hike X amount of hours and get up to the peak, and you see that full 360 dynamic, you know, it's just like, holy cow.
Indeed,
what is this?
Yep.
Yeah, so you know, it's a very similar feeling. It's again tough to articulate, but when you're there in that moment, it is just supreme.
And I've got to agree with you. So I've only seen one launch, and it had to be the coolest experience for me personally to be able to see it, because it was the last day of our citizen scientist astronautics program. So we had graduated, everybody was good, the stress was fine. We'd all done well on the test. We'd all studied really hard. We had just come together as a team. We all hopped in a car and we drove to the beach as close as we could get. And we park, and the executive director and his partner, they get out and they start running. We all start sprinting towards the beach just in enough time to see it go up. And it was that was a perfect experience for the first time. But I certainly can't wait to be more up close and personal with it. And I know that it's something that you've been able to experience a lot. But of course, there was the legendary Launchpad 39A that you had the chance to see a launch at recently, and it's. SpaceX is finally utilizing it. Is the atmosphere a little bit different there because of all the history, or is it, you know, generally the same?
No, I'm glad you said that. And Launchpad 39A, that's it's the same. It's almost like a world wonder. If you're a science tech engineering fan, that place is as hallowed ground as, you know, any of the world wonders around the planet. You know, for a science tech geek, you know, LC-39A is like walking into the Sistine Chapel. Yeah. It's a masterpiece of engineering achievement, and the types of accomplishments that have been, you know, launched from that place are absurd. I mean, you talk about going to the moon, building the entire International Space Station, launching the space shuttle to, you know, send up Hubble, Skylab, just all of these crazy accomplishments that you can think of in space, they likely launched from this place. You know, I've seen a few launches from LC-39A, and every time I go there, it has this magical feeling to it. And if I'm walking around and there's like a rusted screw sticking out of a piece of concrete, I want to take that screw, because it's like, wow, that screw is from this historic place, and I need to have it, even though it's a rusted piece of metal. It's from this place that, you know, it's where humans went to the moon, and it's where humans, you know, started to build this gateway to the cosmos. So for us, and really for all humans, this is one of the most special places humanity has, because it represents when we started to leave planet Earth.
Mm-hmm. And it's not the only thing that you've had the ability to be involved in, you know, not just launches, but you've actually been able to see some of the big upcoming projects. And so we'll just focus on one of those. And that one for me, obviously, James Webb Space Telescope. It is something that I am hoping is around long enough that by the time I get my PhD, I can then convince NASA to give me a job so that I can work on it. But
absolutely,
that's kind of the, you know, that's a goal in life. If astrophysics is exactly where I end up, and I end up, you know, working with the data from anything, I think it's really going to be that one. You know, everybody's that and W first. We hope the W first is still going to happen, but I digress. Yeah. So you get to see, you actually get to see it up close, which is something that I desperately want to do, and I just keep missing it. Every time I'm somewhere, it just moves elsewhere. So can you tell us what it was like to get an inside look, and you had to go, you're completely wrapped up. You were almost like you're in the CDC. you get nothing. Nothing comes off of you, and nothing from that gets onto you. So can you share that experience with us a little bit?
Man, it's an engineering masterpiece. I mean, over $8 billion, and I don't even know what $8 billion looked like until I saw that. You know, it seems like an absurd figure, but then when you see this telescope that's literally got mirrors that are plated in gold, like actual gold, like, wow, okay, I can understand, you know, why this thing is so pricey. But you know, the styles of action, I think it has to like do over 160 mechanical actions to deploy. You know, that's a level of origami and engineering mix that is just, it's supreme. Like to do that many actions while you're out there in the void of space, you know, with all these extreme temperatures, and for it to all go right, that takes a lot of effort. So to be in front of that thing, it was awe-inspiring, and to also speak to the people, the project manager actually that is in charge of the project, and have him talk about what it's capable of doing, was absurd. The Hubble has done great things for our species. The images that have come down from Hubble, I think they've helped to change people, humans, like literally all humans. When you see some of those pictures, the way you think about the cosmos and even Earth or yourself, they change because they give you some type of perspective on what is out there. And the fact that,
here's a
that's the one.
The size of a quarter, and if you look at it, it's complete blackness, but we decided to point a telescope at it, and here's what we found.
Yeah.
And we found everything. We
found
much. Everything. We found it all. And that's only this little smidge of everything that's out there. And it's it's mind-blowing.
And since the Webb is like almost, I think it's between 7 and 8 times the order of magnitude in power. I don't like what? First of all, like I'm having a hard time extrapolating in my mind to what that's going to look like, but I know it's going to be crazy. And also, I mean, all of the additional capabilities that it's going to be using, to detect exoplanets and examine planets, the things that it's going to be capable of are going to be absurd. So yeah, the opportunity to see that before it launches, I consider myself a very lucky human being, because it's a rare object. They don't let like Joe Schmo or anybody off the street like, hey, come and check out this $8 billion telescope. Come on inside.
Yeah. You've got to work for it. And I do got to say, you speak of luck, and you've come in at the right time, and you actually get to see probably the biggest launch since the shuttles. And I don't even know which shuttle mission you would have to go back to get to the records that this thing hit. And so you got to see Falcon Heavy launch. I can only imagine what it was like. So can you tell us a little bit about what your world was like for those few days as everything started to set up and everybody was there?
Sure.
Actually seeing what I'm sure was a massive crowd for the first time in a while. I know SpaceX has been drawing people in, but this I know had to be different.
Yeah, it's man, talk about no sleep. The days leading up to Falcon Heavy, they were they took a lot of work. Lots of writing, lots of prep work, minimal sleep, lots of travel. But when you get there and you know what's about to happen, and you go through the security gate of NASA, and you know that in a couple hours or in a day or so that this rocket is going to launch, it all becomes very real. So to start from the ground up, it's like you said, one of the most popular launches that we've seen in a very long time. The Florida Tourism Board had it clocked at over 100,000 people in the state of Florida, internationally, nationally, traveled to the Space Coast to see this launch. And in terms of, to give you a sense of scale, for other launches, we usually have about 30 to 50 members of the media there to cover standard launches, resupplying the space station, and so forth. For this one, there was over 400 members of the media. So, I mean, it was a packed house. So, I mean, it was nuts. So leading up to it, there was just so much more people there than we're used to. And for me, that was great. I love seeing a packed spaceport because that means people are paying attention. But that does make the job harder, when there's just a sea of people trying to get the same shot, asking the same questions, kind of getting in the way a little bit. That's, it makes it a lot more difficult. So it certainly made the job from a photojournalist, space reporting angle a little bit harder, that's for sure. But that's part of it. If you want to be in this business, you gotta compete against the people that are in the trade. So, leading up to the launch, honestly, I didn't think it was going to take off. With the amount of years that this thing is pushed beyond schedule, and really just, I had a hard time like accepting the fact that it was launch day. Like this is actually going to happen.
Was it originally 2012? Wasn't that the original plan?
It was, yeah. It was. I think it was about 7 years of delays, so like from the original day that it was mentioned. But it's neither here nor there. I mean, yeah. And leading up to launch, I was sweating. Oh God, I remember it. There was just this nervous kind of. I was pacing back and forth. Just I don't know what to do. Oh, this is real. Okay, like, and when we started to get down to the actual countdown, things started to click in, and all of my practiced motor, like all of my practice behavior of capturing rocket launches came in, and I kind of like, went into crisis mode and started getting ready for that. But yeah, there was just seas of people, and I remember looking around, and I've been at Kennedy for about 30, 32, about in between 30 and 33 launches. I can't quite remember right now.
Wow, that's impressive.
And there's just never been this many people, and there's never been as much reaction in the crowd. If I would post something in Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, using those channels, it would just go wild. Like people were on this, just and not the typical crowd. Like just the world was watching this time, and you could really feel it because when you're on the ground and the world's watching, you send something out, they just grab it. So I had never experienced this level of interest in the immediate sense, and all the people traveling there. And then you get to the launch. It's like, holy cow, this thing is massive. It's absurdly big. It almost doesn't even make sense. And the fact that there's rockets that are
quick, if you could liken it to something, because I honestly don't know how big it is. I'm trying to imagine it. Is there anything that you could say that think about this? Think about, if you were to put it next to, this thing. Is there anything that you could think of off the top of your head?
It's like a building, like an actual building.
It's an actual building.
Yeah, it's over 230 feet tall. I mean, it's that number kind of falls short because it's hard to imagine what 230 feet is standing right in front of you, but it's actually a building. It weighs as much as a building. It's and when it starts to move, the fact that a building is actually moving, it's absurd. It's tough to liken it to something because it's almost like it's an absurd thing in and of itself, and there's not many things to compare it to. As soon as takeoff happened, there was this massive roar, just people all around, just losing it. And that's something that doesn't typically happen when you're inside of NASA because people are pretty used to seeing the launches. There. So when it took off, people just absolutely just went nuts, cheering, roaring, crying. I mean, I shed a little bit of a tear because because it was real. This thing that we had all been waiting for. And also what it represents. Falcon Heavy is an absurd machine. The fact that 2 boosters landed on the first drive, amazing. But it represents more than just its technical, mechanical capabilities. This rocket is it's at the spearhead of a company that's changing the game. And they had been launching these smaller rockets, reusable rockets. These are fantastic. They're changing the game, like I had said. But this new one, this Falcon Heavy, it brings them into a new category that they hadn't been in before, launching heavy payloads reusably. So for them to be able to come into this new category and to be able to cheaply launch heavy things into space or a lot of stuff into space, that means the whole industry is going to change. If you remove the 2 primary factors from space travel, or if you reduce the 2 primary factors about space travel that are restricting space travel, price and the ability, or price and cadence. So if you drastically reduce the price, and then 2, you reduce the cadence, you make it so you can just launch all the time, that means space travel is going to change so drastically. So this rocket, this is just the beginning of a mass amount of changes to the industry that's about to happen.
And that's not the only big thing that you've been a part of this year. Another big thing has been you were there at the National Space Council, which is it's been gone for a while, and we're finally bringing it back, which is a good thing. There's certainly some things that I think are debatable about which way we should go, and it just depends on the person. But you actually got to be there for that, and you got to capture the moment and listen in on what's happening. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of some of what happened, what became big media news, and if there was anything that jumps out to you that wasn't a big deal in the media that you thought was maybe a big step forward? Sure,
absolutely. And like you said, this can be a divisive topic, and it doesn't exactly have to be. It depends on the way you look at it. The fact that we restarted the National Space Council in the government, it's a sign of people paying attention. So if you want to look at it that way, that doesn't have to be bipartisan at all. And that's the way I look at it. The fact that we have people in the government in high-tier leadership roles, bringing this to public attention, using media to get people talking about space, I think that's a great thing. Some of the choices that they've made, these are up for interpretation at an opinionated level, and we don't need to go into those. But some of the things that went over that happened in the Space Council that Mike Pence talked about that I found particularly interesting is there's a lot of interest in the government level to increase the military side of our space program. So this is something that we need to understand. In the United States, we have NASA and
Star Wars.
Sorry,
just kidding. Just kidding.
No,
that's Star Wars.
It's like literally, it's like kind of a joke, but also not really.
Yeah, the Emperor's March is playing. What's going on, Mr. Pence?
There was a lot of posturing about making sure that we remain a dominant force in space. So that when you're talking in that regard, that's militarization. That's putting more satellites that are meant for certain means. So a lot of what I gathered from the Space Council was a governmental interest in increasing military dominance in space, protective capability in space, but also the economy that comes with it. These things they're not cheap. So to have the government greatly interested in launching more cargo up into space or doing more space operations, at the whole, at the end of the day for space, this is a good thing because the technology increases, the amount of interest increases, the budgets towards space increases. So this is what I took from it.
Positive.
Yeah, positive. I'm trying to stay positive because, because space, it was born from rockets meant to destroy cities, the V2, the vengeance weapon. Then that is the project, that is the start of, some people will say, of the space program. So I'm continuing to take a positive viewpoint on it because I view in the long term, it will positively influence our capabilities in space.